Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to these Mobile Talks. As I explained to you some weeks ago, instead of covering one topic in one session, the Mobile World Capital Foundation wanted to do something unusual during these times. We want to go through some elemental topics, and we want to do it with extremely relevant professionals from all over the world to share their provoking and reflective viewpoints in these videos. We will share some of this content that you just see during the session that you just saw, but remember that you can find the full version of the Mobile World Capital website or on the digital platforms. I was saying that we wanted to focus this time in one of the most challenging elements of our lives, the education. And especially now, we are currently at a turning point. Digitization has caused enormous professional, social, aspirational, and emotional changes. All these changes have also had a powerful effect on education and knowledge, as the COVID-19 pandemic has proved. On a professional level, present and future employees will no longer be professionals with static knowledge. The constant change of dynamics, technologies, and businesses themselves forces employees and managers to assume continuous learning as part of their work, what we call lifelong learning. But what about the initial stages of learning? It seems obvious that in order to reach professional maturity like the one we described, students should ideally learn and follow vital educational paths. But what skills and attitudes need to be reinforced? How is each student education personalized, and how are we using technology to accurately support lifelong learning? And last but not least, is the education community prepared for such significant changes? To explore all these topics, today we have a pleasure, an amazing pleasure, which is we've got amazing guests, but I would like to start listening to someone who's spent most of his life trying to spread the word on all these topics. Here's Andreas Schleicher, a very inspiring person. Probably you know him, probably you saw some of the videos we made. Someone who is behind the well-known PISA report that measures learning skills of 15-year-old students in more than 75 countries. And you must also know him because he is the Director for Education and Skills and Special Advisor on Education Policy to the Secretary General at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Mr. Schleicher, thank you very much again for your time, for your generosity, and for joining us today in this amazing session. And before we start with the debate, I would like to listen to you. We would all like to listen to you for some minutes so that you can help us to set and highlight the most important aspects we should have in mind when talking about this new education. So, Ms. Schleicher, thank you very much, and the floor is yours, whenever you want.
Gracias, thank you. And first of all, I really want to commend Spain for how you were able to put together a coalition that has made education continue when schools were shut down. The government chipped in, the publishing sector chipped in, the tech industry. You know, this has been just amazing. It sets a great example how education works, public with private rather than public versus private. It's a great example. My only question is, why did you need a pandemic to make that happen? It's really, I think, the new normal. But let me share a few thoughts on the pandemic and the time after. I think the biggest message we need to take away from this is that the future will always surprise us. Climate change will disrupt our lives probably a lot more than the pandemic, and artificial intelligence puts everything that we do to the test. Our school systems have done well to educate, second-class robots, people who are good at repeating what we tell them. But what will make us first-class humans in this world of artificial intelligence? And then there's going to be, lots of other changes that we will need to come to grips with in education. We don't know, nobody of us knows the future, but we have to become better to think in terms of alternative futures and to think about, how we can prepare ourselves for this. Obviously, one scenario is that, the presence will just continue. And let's be honest, the status quo has always many protectors. And sometimes, we as parents are part of the problem, not part of the solution. We get very anxious when our children no longer learn what was so important for us, or when they start to learn things we no longer understand. Teachers are often more likely to, teach how they were taught than how they learned how to teach. And as a policymaker, you can lose an election over education when something goes wrong, but you're not going to win an election over education because it does take time to translate good ideas into better outcomes is very, very tough. And, that's also why, we have seen this massive transformation in the world of technology, in the world of society over the last decades. But then, when you look at the performance of our education systems over that same period, it's been pretty flat. More or less, we can say over the last 20 years, our education systems have not caught up with the technological challenge. It's not just a challenge for Spain, it's what we see in much of the industrialized world. In our last PISA assessment, we had 9% of young people who could reliably distinguish fact from opinion. You can say, well, that's better than 7% in the year 2000, but we live in a totally different world. In the year 2000, students read, school books, carefully curated. When you had a question, you could look it up in an encyclopedia, trust the answer to be true. Today, young people look up things on Google and they're going to find 100,000 answers to their question, and nobody will tell them what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is not true. This is where this gap between what societies need and what education systems provide becomes such a problem. Now, it brings me to a second scenario. Maybe, one day our school systems will just crack apart under the pressures of technological change. Everything that isn't built for the network age will ultimately fall apart under its pressure. And, if you look at the reality, you can see basically students spend, 50, sometimes almost 50 hours per week on the internet. The virtual world has become the real world for young people today. Even in school, it's very, very interesting to see when you look at, access of students to computers, which they can use for schoolwork with a link to the internet. If you look, back to the year 2000, you could look to countries like Iceland that were well equipped, or maybe the United States. But the world has changed. You can see countries like Russia, like Latvia, like the Slovak Republic. They were the laggards. 20 years ago, they were nowhere. Now they've caught up. Basically, most countries in the industrialized world now have young people who have access to the digital world. The digital divide is not so much a divide of technology. It's more a divide of our capacity to use it, students' capacity to navigate complex information, teachers' capacity not to conserve, teaching practice with technology, but to use technology to transform learning, to transform teaching. Basically, you have now entirely new learning experience. Artificial intelligence allows us to track how students learn differently. And basically, computer, when you study mathematics, the computer can figure out, what you like, what you don't like, where you're good at, where you're struggling, and can make learning so much more interactive, so much more participative, so much more kind of social. Assessment and exams, we can actually make assessment real. While you study, you can get that feedback rather than, weeks or years later. We can look at learning analytics, giving teachers real-time information about how different students learn differently, and then engage with that diversity so much more productively. But, once again, technology is always only as good as it is actually being deployed, and that's where you see the huge gaps. And Spain is by far not on its own. In most countries, you have similar rates of teachers. Basically, you can say maybe half of the teachers are ready for the digital age. Some countries have seen good progress. You can see, countries like Sweden, like Romania, Israel, Finland, Croatia, they were not so great, a few years ago, but they are now advancing very quite quickly. Also, we know that many countries during the crisis, this is data from March this year, have actually made enormous efforts to get teachers up to speed. I want to actually credit teachers in Spain for the enormous effort they have made to, upgrade their own skills. Not about going back to university, but continuing learning. It brings me to a third scenario. Maybe, it's not about so much school systems falling apart or specializing or outsourcing, but schools becoming more of a center, bringing together, the world of learning, the world of work, civic society. Schools becoming hubs and teachers moving beyond being instructors to becoming good coaches, good mentors, good facilitators, good designers of innovative learning environments. A world that we can see today in countries like Estonia, in Finland, Denmark. But again, then you ask yourself, are our schools ready for this? Well, you can see, for example, a country like the Netherlands, 9 out of 10 decisions are made at the front line in the schools. Schools have enormous discretion, actually, to redesign their environments, to configure the space, the people, the time, the technology to their needs. But you look to a country like Spain, 1 in 10 decisions is made by those people who are implementing them. Most of the decisions, are made somewhere at a higher level of authority. If we cannot change that pyramid, if we cannot create more empowering environments where schools are not just places where students learn, but where everybody learns, teachers learn, school leaders learn, parents learn, we will not succeed with this. Let me conclude with one last scenario. Maybe one day technology is going to override all of our institutions. Basically, we are going to learn anytime, anywhere, in any context. We will have, digital tutors following us. Maybe that's another scenario. But, once again, let's look at the reality. If you look, for example, at global education venture capital, that's just, how much resources do we pour into new ideas? Well, in the year 2014, it was mainly a story about the United States. If you look to the year 2018, 2019, it's mainly a story about China. Europe as a whole is this tiny green sliver at the top of this. If we want to be a more innovative education system, we have to change the picture. We have to put a lot more resources into this. We have to think, what is the right balance between modernizing and disrupting education? How do we reconcile new goals with old structures? How do we support globally minded teachers and students who are also locally rooted? Now, how do we foster innovation while recognizing the very conservative nature of the social enterprise of education? And finally, how do we leverage the potential of tomorrow with our existing structures, our existing capacity? How do we reconfigure the spaces, the people, the technology, the time to educate learners for their future, not our past? Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Thank you very much for your explanation. And we'll go through many of the topics that you were just pointing out. Let me ask you 4 or 5 items before we introduce all the guests. You were pointing out, and it was interesting that you said, why did we need a pandemic to start moving? But I remember I read some interview that I don't know where I read it, but some interview, some explanation that you gave some months ago, just after March, after the pandemic happened. And you were saying that professors should change their methodology and techniques from September on. Did they do it? Did everything change? Or you feel like, of course, there was a part that changed, but not enough? How do you feel that after a year, or especially since we started the new course in September?
Well, you have seen probably more technological, more social innovation in the last year than in the last 10 years. And you have seen many teachers who are on their way, teachers in Spain who have become amazing designers of, technology tools, of new pedagogies. But is it enough? It's a very disparate picture. Some have moved, others have stayed behind. And I don't think we have yet the enabling and empowering environment to make that kind of innovation systemic. Our systems are still, more hostile than friendly to new ideas and innovation. And I think if you want to see innovation at scale, we have to stop pushing, new and sometimes old ideas top down into the system and become much better to find the good ideas at the front line and then to scale and spread them and make them systemic. So that's, yes, I think some teachers are on the way, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Besides Spain, you pointed out many of the examples with Spain. Of course, we're here, but are we in a worse position than many other countries? Do you feel that we have to do much more work on that sense?
Well, I'm in two minds about this. On the one hand, of course, Spain was hit harder by the pandemic, and the school system was in a way less resilient. The pandemic, it was not digitally prepared. It was not in terms of the profession. But I also want to commend you, really. I think Spain has reacted much more rapidly than many other countries, including countries, like France, I think like Italy, even Germany. I do think Spain has really been very quick to sort of get its act together and get ready for the new normal. And I think that's a very positive sign.
But do we still have, and I think that you explained that on a previous interview we had the pleasure to have with you.
I can't hear you, sorry. Sorry, I could not hear your question.
Yeah. That if we have some professors or teachers that they keep on teaching for a world that does not exist anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, but again, we have to create environments where teachers have better opportunities to learn themselves. We have to connect, the most amazing teachers with the teachers who struggle. This is not something that's going to happen, in a very mechanistic way. I do think, if we are starting to sort of look more outwards rather than upwards, I do think you will see more change at scale. Also, if we are more supportive for innovation, if we, invest in leadership, school leaders, incentivize, encourage innovative work, I think you're going to see a lot of change. I think you have a lot of, I don't think any industry has the luxury to employ so many highly qualified people as the education system. Everybody in the school system in Spain has a university degree. Very few companies can afford that. But I don't think, the education system is using that talent as well as it could.
Now that we start moving, as you were saying, that Spain reacted rapidly, but same that happened in many other countries, some more or less. Do we have to consider that the next step should be to start thinking that one of that elements that we're debating, which is lifelong learning, should also be applied from the roots in the teacher's body and the professor's body, universities and schools, so that they can be updated all the time, so that they can transfer that also to the students?
Yeah, lifelong learning will not happen without being, included in the roots of learning. It's about the motivation, the capacity, that sense of a growth mindset that will create a culture of lifelong learning among the students. And, your students are not going to become lifelong learners if they don't see their teachers as lifelong learners. And I think actually the pandemic provides an amazing opportunity. It's about co-creation. You will see that some of your students, have greater technological skills than their teachers. So let's, use that potential and bring people together. And I think if we create a culture of learning, a culture also of where people lose fear of failure, where we, lose a sense of hierarchy, where we actually, look at potential, I think we can really redesign education. In this moment, don't ask yourself whether people follow your instructions. Ask yourself how well your teachers can actually collaborate. And then I think you're going to see that change.
Yeah, and it's key to reinforce and to have empower our teachers. We all have, as you were explaining some interview I read or in your book, we all have memories of that teacher that opened our mind, that let us dream and helped us dream. So it's so important to focus on that. Andreas, it's amazing listening to you. It's absolutely enriching, but I would like to introduce you to some other guests that accepted to join us for this little while that we have. Today, as I was saying, and you may know, we're trying to face this kind of topics in a much deeper way, and that's why I wanted to explore this new education from different angles. During the last few weeks, and as we were commenting with Andreas, we analyzed the following topics. We went through lifelong learning, the students and teachers of the future, or the present, we should say, the hyperconnectivity effects, and the digital divide. For this reason, it's an honor to welcome to these next professionals who are very involved with these topics. And today we have with us Marta Padros. She is Director of Development of Human Resources at CaixaBank. Hello, Marta, how are you? And thank you very much for joining us. Hi, Marta. Hope we can hear you. I don't know if you're muted. Can you hear us, right?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Hi.
Thank you very much for joining us. Marc, Sanz, Head of Education at Google. I'm not going to say which places in Europe or in North Africa or where in Google, as he normally says, in places where you can have good meals and good weather. Marc, thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure. Hey, everyone.
Thank you. Albert Forn, mSchools Director for GSMA with amazing and innovative programs and really recognized around the world. Thank you very much for joining us too, Albert.
Thank you very much.
Javier, Rodríguez Zapatero, Executive Chairman of ISDI and Digital Talent Group. Thank you very much for joining us too.
It is a real pleasure. I hope we can enjoy together today.
I'm sure we will. I'll try to be very quiet because I want to know and I want to listen and learn from all of you. And of course, Andreas will keep with us, Andreas Schleicher, which is great to have you for these more minutes. Until 6 we'll be here. And before we start the short debate, I would like to know your point of view on the general topic that we're debating. And of course, you can focus on your specific sector, expertise, anything you would like to highlight. So I would like to give you a couple of minutes to each of you. Marta, if you want to start, would be really happy to listen to you.
Yeah. Well, I agree with everything that Andreas said. And the truth is that, what we do is we receive or we hire people when they're in their, early 20s. But we have observed recently when we were hiring that of course, it's not only about, giving them now a lifelong education once they're adults, but it would be much, much better if the whole ecosystem worked together and if we worked all together. What I mean, private corporates together with universities, together with school leaders, with teachers, with researchers, and with everybody. But starting from the beginning, if you allow me to say, I would really start, and I know some countries are doing a better job than others, but I would start by giving teachers and school leaders, its importance. We need to give them recognition because we're not really doing it everywhere. So first of all, it would be recognize what they're doing, recognize the importance, especially today, that they've got. Empower them, we've said, empower school leaders and give them even more voice and let them, talk and let them propose different things and innovate. We come, or some of us come from a culture where, making a mistake is something that's not good. And this is the moment to just try different things to make students experience and have vital experiences so that their learning process is better and so that it lasts longer. So, yeah, of course, once we managed to improve a little bit this perspective, for me, lifelong learning and lifelong education, it's crucial today. It's vital, and this is what actually we're doing in our company. We've been doing that for a few years, but the truth is that after what's happened after this pandemic, we've realized that it's not about giving them education throughout life. It's doing it differently because it's a survival issue. Some companies, and it's both responsibility. It's not only about the corporation, but it's also about a change of mindset. It's about learning and knowing, or being aware that it's a transition and I'm going to have to learn for life, whether I like it or not. And since it's a surviving thing, I would suggest let's try to have fun with that. Let's try that people understands that, gets it or buys it and has fun, and try to find these opportunities to keep learning and to reinvent themselves, I would say.
Thank you very much, Marta. Blowing, yeah, super interesting. Marc, I would like to listen to you also for a couple of minutes so that you start setting up which are your challenges or how do you see the whole thing?
Thanks so much, Pipo. I completely agree with you, Marta. I like to approach this from a different angle, and I approach it through the angle of what is my responsibility as head of education for a big region in Google to the world, right, or to the learners. And I've been about 9+ years in the team, so we've had a lot of success with in Google, right? But we've helped a lot of schools adopt our tools, and in many of the at least commercial measures, we've done tremendous impact. Now we know that adopting tools or laptops or software solutions is definitely not equivalent to learning outcomes. It's a requirement. It's a digital foundation upon what we build. But I tried to answer about 3 or 4 years ago. I started to think, what is my real job? And I started to think, I need to answer the question, what is the role of technology in education? Which seems like a pretty simple question, but I actually really struggled answering, I have to be honest. And it took me on a journey of 3 years of really getting into more research, not only searching, but researching a little bit more, getting closer to the neuroscience community and different institutions, and really going deep into what the role of technology should be. And I quickly saw that one of the biggest, at least, or the biggest for me, contribution technology can do is to personalize the learning experience. So it's actually a much more professionalized experience. It's the equivalent of, like, if you go to a doctor, instead of having 1 hour or 3 hours of that doctor telling you what's good for your health in general, you have about probably 6 minutes of average medical consultation where they check only to you. And we see the absolute opposite happening in education. We also see in the medicine analogy that medicine has a corpus of research and development and has a corpus of engineers, which are doctors, that based on that research make good decisions for each patient and do it as unified or personalized as possible, as well as there's a ton of kind of one-to-many initiatives from health perspective that you can imagine. But then there's a big corpus, a big industry layer that provides professional medical tools to those to that industry. For example, MRI machines, blood tests, all sorts of machinery and stuff. And I'm not seeing that in education. In fact, when I see that we talk about digitalizing education, about bringing technology to the classroom, new technologies, we're talking about a laptop, right? Like the laptop that the doctor has is not health tech. Why is just a laptop for a teacher ed tech, right? It's like, it's the most basic general purpose technology. I'm actually very bullish that through AI, but not only AI, but really like a general disruption of what the system and where the funding of education goes, we need to build this professional education instruments layer to support the true development, true professionalization of the educator job.
Super interesting. Laptop in your case would be a Chromebook, we all know that. But it's true that technology does not make the whole thing. We need other things about that. And personalization is something that we want to talk today also about, because I think it's key. Albert Forn, Director of mSchools. Sorry, one thing before. Marc, I said Marc Sanz, and I know he likes to say Marc Sanz Lopez. Hello to Marc's mom and to all the moms in the session. Albert, whenever you want, I would like to listen to you also for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Pipo, and thank you also for making my mother angry at me now.
I said hello to all the moms also.
Yeah, no, it's been great to hear you guys. Very interesting comments from Marc as well. I think that this debate about what technology is in education is very relevant to the times, and in particular to all that we've suffered over the past year or plus. We've seen that in many cases, as you were commenting, Marc, some of these basic things that we think are technology or ed tech are really just the tip of the iceberg, and accompanying them with all the different methodologies and pedagogies that are required to actually make this transformation useful. Or make that technology actually achieve something in the classroom or in with regards to students' achievements is a huge struggle. And I sort of echo back to the words of Andreas here, because he was also commenting on the fact that we have a lot of, I think we have a lot of knowledge about things that we can change, that we could potentially change if there was the will. But the will is very difficult to find when I think also Andreas was saying, when education is something that has to be very long-term. It's a very long-term project. It requires a lot of long-term thinking, and it requires commitment to policies that don't show results in 1 or 2 years, and much less show results in an election cycle, which now is like almost every 6 months, right? So that is really one of the big challenges we have, which is not only the fact that we know a lot of things, is how do we get people to be brave enough to do them? I think also one of the very relevant things, and that we've seen also from the program that we developed here within this public-private partnership that we represent, is the fact that you can do a lot by empowering teachers and the people who know about what things work in the classroom and what successful case studies are and things that we can really try to replicate or bring to light. That's one of the approaches we had with the project. But also the fact that we were able to create a space for teachers to feel comfortable in taking risks. And this is something that the system usually does not cater for. We cater for places where teachers have to basically follow the rules, make sure they deliver the curriculum, and make sure their students pass the cut. And that does not conduct to things such as relevant as, curiosity, motivation, creative thinking, whatever. And it certainly does not produce teachers that are willing to take risk, or at least it really mitigates those teachers who are willing to try things and to develop some of their thoughts and ideas in the classroom. So that's what we struggled to do when we put the program in place, is find a way that we could actually let teachers move into a different role than what they have today, allow them to become these mentors and these coaches and have these different profiles and use these different pedagogies to try to produce different results in the classroom and focus on many more things that were relevant to these kids who go through their classes, such as, problem solving, analytical skills, critical decisions, and all these things that are so relevant to the skills and the technologies that we have to deal with today. So I think it's very important for us to recognize that not only do we have this problem with probably respecting and listening and supporting teachers, but also providing them with places where they feel comfortable in innovating. And this is really a huge challenge that I don't really see addressed in any education system across the world, or in very few. Let's put it that way. I don't want to be so critical. But it really is something that we need to find a way to do, and I think that should be a challenge for all of us going forward.
Mind-blowing too. Thank you, Albert. We'll focus many of the things that you just pointed out. Javier, let me finish with you this round so that you can just focus a bit what you would like to highlight. Your disruptive mind. I think it's going to be interesting to listen how you want to destroy the whole thing to reinvent it again.
Yeah, I think I'm always. I feel like a child every time. I ask myself why not, or what if, probably too often, and that's why I want to disrupt things. So all over the place. But I'd like to take the discussion a little bit, before, and I think I'm hearing a lot of interesting things around the how and the what can be done. I think it's important for those people that are listening to us to focus in the why this topic is so important. And for me, and I think all my colleagues here do share that feeling and that sentiment. We're living in a world in which things are changing dramatically fast. And Andreas was saying that in his fast. I wish I could have heard in detail to some of your slides because there's a lot there to be learning from. But the point is, the world is changing exponentially. We are surrounded by huge technologies, artificial intelligence, blockchain, nanotechnology, biotechnology. All that combined together is basically changing the world. And we're not equipped, we're not prepared to actually understand and act upon those changes. Actually, when I saw Andreas, when I saw your slide there on that exponential change and a linear change in education, that really is the why we need to do things, because it's widely known and understood that societies do not evolve if they do not learn as fast as the environment is changing. Never in history we've been exposed to such a fast changing environment. And what worries me is the fact that it's not only changing in a very fast manner, is changing in a very unequal way. We see the world being diverted. We see the world increasing the gap between those that are digitally prepared and those that are not digitally prepared. I was sharing with my colleagues here the fact that the big tech companies now, 5 of them account for $7 trillion of market cap, and they are the biggest and the fastest growing. And societies need to understand this. Why? Because let me reflect on this. Capitalism and communism, which are widely talked about today, are old ways of governing the world. They were a response to previous industrial revolutions, because those industrial revolutions basically changed the shape of the world, and we needed to actually answer to those problems. Now we are in another revolution, and we need a new governance. And the only way we're going to be able to actually collaborate as a civil society to make sure that we get a new governance in place is by being educated. So that is the reason why I am so passionate about this topic on top of the fact that, my mom is a school teacher, my father is a university teacher, my sister is a school teacher, and my wife is a university teacher. And I was in the executive world for most of my life, but now I'm probably ending here, trying to actually help this world to get on board with the new education system. And I'm not going to get in the house because I have a lot of ideas. I think I'm going to learn much more from my colleagues here. And then in the next one, I'll talk about the alliance of us, because I think it's really important to have a word on that.
I really wanted to ask you before we get into some of the topics, if you can just, because you are like, many of you guys are like in a perpetual beta and you're constantly evolving. And even during the pandemic, you decided to join forces and create an alliance for education called AZ, H-A-Z, like saying make it in English would be, or light. Can you just, Javier, explain us a bit what's AZ and what are you trying to do? What have you done really up to now? Because I know you've been talking with many political groups and trying to change things. Can you just give us a bit of flavor on that?
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, many people in many important companies do care a lot about education, and they're doing their things. They meet with teachers, they try to help the education system. But we talked and we put ourselves together basically 8 months ago, and we said, why don't we join forces and we use the power of our companies to actually create momentum and knowledge around the topics that we are discussing today: how to digitize the education, how to make sure that the teacher role is the right one, how do we change curriculum, all these topics that are widely spread and widely talked about. Let's say we just put our brains together, companies like Caixa, like the World Mobile Capital, like Google, like us, like ISDI, putting forces together to basically say, okay, let's try to come up with the house, the ideas that the public sector could actually grasp and put together to actually create a new education system. It's really exciting to see how many things we've done in the past 6 months, and we're really excited because I think the outcomes are going to be very soon out there to actually create movement.
Many of you are involved in this alliance, and I'm sure it's going to be really successful. Let me ask you about some things that all of you pointed out, and let's start debating about some of the things, because we've got 22 minutes left, and I want to try to go fast in many things. One thing that I realized that was really interesting, Andreas, Javier was pointing out that we are in a moment that is really changing, as we all know. We can say that in a way we are in an emergency, let's say, in education terms. I know that this can sound a bit kind of even utopic, but why countries are not making an effort to, the same way they realize that now with the pandemic they have to invest 20 euro for each vaccine, or 10 euro or 3 euro, I don't mind, to put the same effort on education, because that's the best vaccine we can give to our future. So why is it so hard? And we are just, instead of deciding if Moderna, AstraZeneca, Janssen or whatever, let's just join forces. Andreas, I think you're muted.
Yeah, some countries have done that. In the 1960s, Korea was poorer than Afghanistan today. And what did it do? It actually invested in its education system. And it became, an economic and a cultural and an education superpower. And Vietnam today is doing the very same thing. Parts of China, are now at the top of the PISA scales. So, you do find systems that have actually done exactly that. But it is hard, the urgent always takes precedence over the importance. Today, we have, and I don't want to blame Spain, but, we were keeping shopping centers open when we closed the schools. Is that the right choice that societies make? I do think, all the big questions are about prioritizing the presence versus the future. And I think we got to do a better job in this. Our schools today is going to be our economy, our society tomorrow. But, you have some parts of the world that are very, very good at this, that have understood that message. And I think we can do that. And it's not going to take a lot of resources. In fact, Spain does invest a lot in education. It is really not about, building back better, but building forward differently and, configuring the people, the space, the technology, time in a different way. I actually think this is an achievable goal. Listen more to your students. And actually, young people today, if we listen more carefully to how young people learn, what they learn, we will build better education system. If we listen more to teachers, about pedagogy rather than, to people in universities who design curricula, probably we're going to see better pedagogical practice. I think we have many of the tools. And I just sort of one point that Marc made before. Actually, one of the most puzzling findings for you in the kind of tech sector is that actually, the amount of technology in schools is often negatively related to outcomes. And you'd find the same, if you bring a truckload of pencils to schools or even expensive fountain pens, you'd see the same result. It'd probably become more of a distractor than a contributor to good learning. We miss that tech part. A part that connects the technology with the learning experience. That is the kind of the software part that is actually going to build that fabric for the teachers, for the learners, for the schools. We have a very industrial setting, and we need a much more professional kind of work environment. And I think it's possible, and we do see that happening. Don't ignore the good examples.
I'll keep in mind that first thing that you said, important versus urgent. And the second question regarding the pandemic, Albert, and you are very involved in trying to bring technology to schools, to create a new environment for teachers and students. But there was one thing that I don't remember if it was Javier or Marc who pointed out when talking about technology in schools and all these things, and Marc was saying about the laptops, but I think Javier also pointed out, are we not confusing too many times technology versus mindset? I mean, it looks like it was locked down. Okay, we need to make a video call. That's the most important thing. That's not going to solve anything, right?
Well, yes and no. So it's a hard question to answer because and also because a lot of times we try to answer it from our very sort of high resource environment settings. So if we look at it from our point of view and we say, kids can't go to school, what do we need? We need to give them a connection so they can be connected to their teachers. That's not a wrong answer. It's just not the full answer. It is part of the answer, but unfortunately what happened and what we were sort of first eyewitness to is that a lot of the teachers who were probably very good teachers in the classroom, when they transitioned to an online environment, became completely lost or didn't really know how to react or had a very difficult time in giving continuity to their education, to their classrooms, because they were just not prepared to transition their education and their pedagogy to a different format, which is, tremendously different. It may seem it's not so because you're still connected, you can still see the person, you can still talk face to face, but it is tremendously different to have that sort of experience with your students online. And therefore, unfortunately, and this is why I always say that the pandemic has been an unmitigated disaster for schools and for these kids who are impacted by it. There's no other way to put it. They have been totally hit by something that has turned their education upside down, created a lot of chaos for them. And in the best cases, they will get over it. But in the worst cases, many of these students who've gone through this pandemic will find that they will be heavily impacted into their future education and professions. So it is a huge disaster. Now, the fact that we threw technology at it was not wrong. It was one thing that we had to do, but it unfortunately needs a lot more to function and to be useful. And then maybe I'm not going to finish on this note. I'm going to throw it in now, so it's not the end of my sort of conversation here. But I would like to say that one of my sort of nightmares that I have sometimes when I wake up, like in the wee hours of the morning, is that we passed the pandemic, everybody's vaccinated, things are going really well, and then we all sort of forget about what happened because we were so resilient as human beings that we can sort of forget that education went, so badly for such a long time, that all these kids were out of school, and that, it's not too bad. We can sort of avoid things, and we did okay, and we survived this. I would think that, if one thing this pandemic should teach us is that we cannot forget what happened, and we really need to make decisions that are future sounding and future proofing.
Albert, in 2-3 minutes, I'll ask you to summarize in 30 seconds. I know it's very little also what you do with mSchools, but before that, and now that you're all talking about students, when talking about this, what happened with students and professors 1 year ago, when the world locked down, we wanted to also, and we talked with her a couple of weeks ago, to analyze and explore about this topic with Ms. Stefania Giannini, who's the Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO. And she pointed out where you're going to listen.
Education systems were not prepared, not well equipped to move from traditional classroom almost overnight to a new kind of virtual setting. More than 65% of teachers state we are not prepared to move to digital learning because of lack of skills, because of lack of training, and because of lack of infrastructures.
So a bit what we were saying, I don't know, Marc, how that affected also to you. Javier was pointing out the results that we knew yesterday about Google and the way, of course, everybody, well, some of the big top companies increased so much. And you explained some days, I think, that can you go again with that information that every kid learn or in the platform we're learning like 1,300 years a day or an hour of hours consumed through Meets and through all these platforms? How is that thing?
Oh, you're killing me, Pipo. I can't remember.
I will give you that. I will give you the message. Anyway, how did you feel the whole change in Google Classroom and in your platforms in terms or in order to help kids and students, and especially on that part that you said, personalization, not giving the same to everyone?
Yeah, it's been insane, right? Like, it's funny because I was just preparing some internal presentations we do on review of all the business and how we're doing in every country, and like in a month right before doing these presentations, which are pretty much ready, Corona happened, and then every metric we had pretty much for 3 years was condensed in 2 months of work. Like, I remember how Italy completely turned on digital. We worked with the Ministry of Education that I think did great work over there. And suddenly, I think it was like over 4 million students came online in a month or two. That is absolutely incredible. And I really laughed when Andreas said, why do we need a pandemic, right? And I always, I think that it's so strongly that having a need is the best way of disrupting or creating movement and disrupting what there is, and generally to generate change. And I don't think, as a society, we understand what the need is from education. I feel it's been extremely politicized. Albert, said about our 6-month elections cycles, which also made me giggle. And we're not properly understanding. I think, I can't remember who said it, definitely someone wiser than me, but I love this sentence that said, education is something that it's done to you, and learning is something you do yourself. And we keep talking about education, but education in many ways is just a vertical, it's an industry. But we should be talking more about learning. And sometimes these things can be cheesy about what name you pick, but it's really learning that we should be talking about, right? When I see metrics in my sector, it's usage. How many users are doing something? How many laptops are distributed? What kind of laptops people use? What tools? What software tools? And not even dropouts is mentioned. But I don't really hear metrics like, oh, well, the reading comprehension at this level has gone up at this percentage point, and we see less variance because we've implemented these standard practices that we now are going to roll out because we've done a pilot here somewhere. I don't hear things like the FDA or the European Medicine Agency saying, oh, we actually just finished a 10-year research on this kind of material or these tools or this type of tools. And we're actually, the conclusion is that this works, but this doesn't, these are the secondary effects, right? Just like a medicine. We're not taking this approach. And it feels like when we talk to governments every 1, 2, 3 years, we're talking to a complete different organization with complete different ideas, vision, and not a constant plan, right? We were mentioning before, but Andreas said something many years ago that it stuck in my head, which is that the constant regularity of investment is much more important than the level. So I think when we talk to Spanish politicians, which I do a lot, or in the Middle East, or in Italy, or in Poland, I always tell them it's not about investing more, it's about investing better and really rethinking how you put that money. And I just want to end with this other point, was I think it was Andreas, you said that our systems are still more hostile than friendly to innovation. And I always say this sentence, which I think it's mine, but maybe I heard it out there. But I love saying that innovation in education is generally legal. Because if you realize how strict and how immobile our systems are, honestly, you just have triple the respect for teachers that manage to even innovate within that robust, that strict system, right? So, with a final note, I left you with a thought that for me it really blew my mind, which is the idea that if you have a surgery with a doctor, right, and you didn't need that surgery, or they didn't follow protocol, or they did something that is clearly negligent, you can sue them for negligence, but you actually cannot sue anyone for negligence in education. That bar doesn't exist. We don't have education negligence.
You know which is my nightmare, as Alberto was saying, he sometimes wakes up with a nightmare. It is that we only have 8 minutes left, and that's killing me, because there are so many things I want to share that it's killing me. I would like to jump faster than everything, but let me go fast, because I want to go with one more question on this part of students and teachers. I know it's very little, and I want to ask also Marta something important regarding to how we train that little kids to become people understanding that they need to learn and unlearn and relearn all the time. But Javier, one quick thing. Oh, and regarding that, the information I said, Marc, was that you explained somewhere that people were attending classes through Meet to the equivalent as 1,300 years of learning every day. That was the data. But Javier, the question I wanted to ask you is, how do we change that mindset? Do we need to kind of create a new scenario? Do we have to destroy everything we had? Do we need to, how do we change it? Because there are many things to change. As you said, everything changes so fast. Yeah, but how do we do it?
I think you know, we need a pandemic to make this happen. I think human beings, we just need to be sometimes punched in our faces to react. We need to suffer to react. We tend to be very conservative. So you know, many times I keep saying that we should probably tear down all universities in the world and restart from scratch. Although you know, probably you know, Andreas, I know does not agree with this, because I know that philosophy of the fact that we can build from where we are, and I agree also with that. But I think that we have a unique opportunity now to actually redo things differently. You know, and I not only see it in the education world, I see it also in the corporate and companies world. If we take advantage of this pandemic and we're able to actually foresee a world that is going to be different, those who actually become hybrid will actually get the benefits of the new education. More collaboration, more problem solving, focusing, more critical thinking, all these things that are needed are going to be helped by technology. And if we actually put our efforts together, we'll make it happen. And yes, some distraction may need to come from that, because the public education, at least in my country, does not work. Full stop. It does not work. It's not equipped to actually cope with a fast-pacing world that we are now living.
Yeah, and I would love to explore, but we will not be able, that thing that you said, you pointed out, personalization, in terms of if kids will have to start school at the same time and finish the same course all at the same time or not, because everyone learns different things and differently. So that would be another thing to explore. But Marta, I want to listen to you. When we talk about changing that mindset, everything that we do in that initial stages will affect in a very critical way afterwards. And as an expert in HR and the way you lead it in CaixaBank, I would like to know if achieving those type of scenarios would help building better professionals, and not only professionals, because as you explained us some minutes ago, and you were saying when we're offline, this has a lot to do many times with the core top directors in the company, general managers, and everybody need to think or desire to learn and to believe in lifelong learning. Yeah.
Let me first. You were asking Javier about, when do we change and why or if we needed this pandemic situation. We change mainly either for love reasons or necessity. So this probably has been a necessity issue, therefore we've changed. But as we mentioned before, we have this capacity of adapting and evolving, but we have also the desire somehow not to be disruptive. So unless we do something so that all these changes remain, some of us will come back to where we were because we still feel safer there. So this is a big issue that we've got there. And regarding your question, for me, it's not only about, I totally agree, taking action. It's that, different agents get together and put pressure on those, agents that can do the change, but it's empowering and recognition, the paper of teachers and schools. If we manage or if we change this education system, of course, when they get to the professional status, things are going to be easier. But for me, the good news is that it's never too late. What I mean is that things have changed so dramatically that today, those that not only have access, as Marc said, or Albert, those that not only have access to a computer, but manage to understand, what they can do through a computer, what information they can get, all the network that they can do are going to survive today. And it will not really matter that much if they've got a university degree or not. What I mean is that we've got the chance today to enroll in these new possibilities a lot of people that hasn't been there before. So for me, it would be wonderful if we all worked together. But the good news, as I said, it's never too late. And I've seen it in the bank where I work. We were disrupted. So we've had to put it all upside down because even though we all had computers, we were lucky because we all had computers. So, we were somehow saved. We could work from the very beginning from home. But then it's, okay, how do I do it? I had never been in a Teams before. I had heard about Agile and these new methodologies, but I was not really in those technologies. But we've all learned, it took us very little to understand. And here I come to what Javier said. Why do we need to change? Why do I have to make that effort before? And why do I have to try to change that paradigm? So why do I have to change that effort into understanding that it's a new paradigm and that I have to enjoy that and that I can change no matter, whether I'm 40, 50, 60 or 80.
Unfortunately, Marta, we're running out of time because there's a lot of what you explained that I would love to explore. The same way that, Andreas, I want to ask you something that I know this is going to be killing. I mean, it's going to be a bit even painful, I would say, because I'm going to ask you about two topics that we could explore, elaborate on each of them for 2 hours or for 2 days. But I would like to just have a quick insight on from your side in two things. First, we tend to talk about all these things being connected, if you know how to use the Teams, if you know how to do that, or as Javier was saying, and I think that's very important, he was saying my government is not doing right things yet, or administration is not doing all-time good things. So the two questions for short are, first, okay, that's beautiful, but half of the world is disconnected. So what do we do with that world, professionals and kids and teachers who are disconnected? Are we going to give a super education to some privileged guys? And the second, what about the role of administrations and the way to join forces in between public and private? We know how it works, innovation, regulation, the speed, all that things. Andrea, sorry for that. I mean, I know, Andreas, that's too much for too little.
Yeah, no, on the first question, I think on making sure that everyone can, play in the digital world, we're not talking about an unsurmountable challenge. If you look at the resources that we invest every day in, roads and bridges and the schooling infrastructure, I do think that, the world can afford it. And, in a way, I would also say, the education outside Spain may matter more to Spain in the long run than the education inside Spain. I think it should be in our all interest to ensure that everyone in the world can play in this connected world. And I actually do think that is not a kind of affordability issue. I think it's a feasibility issue. The role of administration, I think public policy will be as imaginative as citizens want it to be. And I really believe that, we as citizens have to be more open to innovation, to new ideas. We have to, the big gatekeepers in education, the universities, who, make us graduate or not graduate. I think those gatekeepers are part of the problem, and it's public policy plays to this. So I actually think, if we take our responsibilities as citizens and make education not a public but a whole of society enterprise, I think we have a good chance to change it. And coming back to Marta's point, the good thing is that every child is born with this motivation and the capacity to become a lifelong learners. Small children are going to question whatever you do, whatever you say. They're going to try out everything. They're not afraid of failure. If we just keep a little bit of that energy, I think we can have a fantastic education system. So I think actually this is a very human capability, the capability to learn, to unlearn and relearn. I think we just need to create more a supportive ecosystem around it. And I also want to conclude with one point that Marta made, appreciating the work of our educators more. And this is not about, celebrating it. It's about making teaching not financially, but intellectually more attractive, creating more kind of better environments where teachers can, become part of the design of the solution. I don't think it's an unsurmountable problem.
Very much. I'm very committed to finish this session at 6, really on time. It's 2 minutes past 6. I'm going to ask you 2 more minutes, because I want to ask you a quick insight, a quick detail from each of you. And I would like to know which or how would you start first, moving, or how would you keep on going, but which is the first thing you would do, which is the most crucial thing you would do. But I'm going to ask you if you can just summarize that in 30 seconds. And I will give 20 more to Albert so that he can explain me what is mSchools. So for anyone who doesn't know, because I think that's a good example of a good collaboration between public and private. I think Javier needs to finish. Javier, you have to finish. All right. Thank you very much. And you too. Yeah, we're finishing. Okay, then no worry. Albert, if you just can summarize that.
Thanks.
And we'll finish with that. Thank you very much. You're muted, Albert. I think you're muted. We cannot hear you. Well, anyway, I think we've got some problems with the audio. It was great having you all today with us. Let me thank you very much to Marta Padros, Director of Development of Human Resources at CaixaBank, to Marc Sanz, Head of Education, Marc Sanz Lopez, Head of Education at Google, to Albert Forn, mSchools Director, Albert Forn and his mom also, hello, and Javier Rodríguez Zapatero, who had another meeting and he had to jump really fast, Executive Chairman of ISDI and Digital Talent Group. And of course, I want to thank you very much, Andreas, Schleicher, for your generosity and for your time for some previous days and also today. He's a Director for Education and Skills and Special Advisor on Education Policy to the Secretary General at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Thank you very much to all. It's been short. We'd love to share much more, but there was no time. But there's a good thing. If you just go right now to the website of Mobile World Capital Foundation, you'll find lots of topics that we just shared, some interviews to amazing professionals like Andreas and many more. Hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.